this is about Li Fang. Li Fang, for those who are not aware, he actually is not a part of The Intercept anymore. So he was a journalist. He was a part of The Intercept. It appears he has left The Intercept and he is now writing, I guess, exclusively for Substack. So he has his own Substack now. Well, I want to refresh your memory. We need to go back. We need to go back to the interview with Mehdi Hasan and Matt Taibbi, where Mehdi Hasan tried to do a gotcha moment on Matt Taibbi, basically saying that he had incorrect information in reference to some of the data that was put out about the Twitter files. If you remember that interview, we don't need to go through that again, but I want to explain how we got to this point now. Well, it was actually Li Fang who actually took it upon himself to explain to people that actually Matt Taibbi was correct and Mehdi Hasan was the one who was incorrect. So Matt Taibbi actually did not make an error in reference to the document that Mehdi Hasan was referring to. But moving forward, Li Fang has taken it upon himself to reveal some things about Mehdi Hasan. And apparently, part of that has to do with plagiarism. Now, he was recently on The Hills Rising to discuss this with Bree and Robbie. I thought this was very interesting. And if you have not seen this, you will see it now. But I want to talk about this because I've had my suspicions about Mehdi Hasan before as his work, like as a journalist. We've talked about it before. I did not know that he also had committed plagiarism. And that is a big no. If you talk to people who are journalists, even when I was in undergrad, plagiarism was a no. And so it's really interesting for someone like Mehdi Hasan to question Matt Taibbi's journalistic integrity, and he is guilty of plagiarism. That is why this is so interesting. So let's go ahead and get into this clip here.
In a recent Substack piece, Li Fang reports that back in January of 2000, MSNBC host Mehdi Hasan authored a column in defense of spanking children. No harm in smacking. That is nearly a word-for-word duplication of the article When to Spank, published 2 years earlier in U.S. News and World Report.
The fact that he even wrote an article about the fact that he wrote like a pro spanking article, this is just so, it's weird and it's bizarre to me. I don't get it. I don't believe in that type of punishment. I don't believe in spanking. This is not to say that I did not get spankings when I was a kid. I did, but I don't believe in it. I don't believe in corporal punishment. And if you're like me, I mean, I remember I got spanked one time at school. And I don't know if schools still do this, but this is when we lived in Germany. I got in trouble. I didn't start it, but I got in trouble. This kid, you know, he was a brat and he pulled my ponytail and I punched him. So both of us were punished because of that. And what they used to do there, and I don't know if they still do this anymore, but at my elementary school, what they used to do is when they did spank, they had a paddle and you were paddled by the principal. So when they would beat you, they beat you in front of other people. So it wasn't like this was in a private space or anything. Both of us got paddled in the cafeteria in front of our peers. I don't believe in corporal punishment. I think it's embarrassing and humiliating. So that's not my thing. But it's interesting that he wrote an article about that.
Here to discuss is author and journalist Li Fang. Welcome, Li.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Now, this is a wild one. I remember the days when you, me, Mehdi, Glenn used to be all together under one Christmas party roof at the Intercept, and now it seems
that sounds like fun times.
Oh dear!
So much has happened since then. Obviously, let's go back to the beginning of this dispute, which would it be fair to say happened around Taibbi's interview with Mehdi Hasan over the Twitter files. Then spilled out over into some accusations that Mehdi Hasan made about you as you defended Matt Taibbi's Twitter files reporting. And now there's this follow-up reporting on Mehdi Hasan's previous journalistic mistakes, shall we call it. How do you see all of this as playing out?
Look, I think there's a big focus on the TV interview between Taibbi and Mehdi Hasan, but the most serious allegation came after the interview. On Twitter, after that interview, Mehdi Hasan accused Matt Taibbi of perjury, of lying under oath to Congress. That's a felony with prison time. That's what Michael Cohen was convicted of with prison time. That's what Roger Stone was convicted of. That's a very serious offense. And
right. So I want to pause there and we'll come back in. I'm going to get into this a little bit deeper tonight on my show. But yes, you do have to remember that after that interview with Mehdi Hasan, he actually accused Matt Taibbi of perjury, because when Matt Taibbi testified in front of Congress at that subcommittee hearing, basically he's saying that the error that he pointed out on that interview, or in that interview, basically is the opposite of what was said when he testified in front of Congress. So Mehdi Hasan, in my opinion, with what you see going on right now with Matt Taibbi being threatened to be sent to prison, I feel like it was Mehdi Hasan who stirred the pot. There's always a pot stirrer around. You ever met someone who's just a pot stirrer? It's like, they don't really, I don't know. How can I explain it? It's like they start to stir the pot, and it's like they sort of get the ball rolling and then they disappear when things pop off. And that's what I feel like it was with Mehdi Hasan. I feel like that interview that he had with Matt Taibbi was a trap. I said that from day one. I was like, if I was Matt, I would not have done that interview. I felt like that was a trap to get him on something, then to be able to threaten him with jail time, to get people like Matt Taibbi to be quiet, to silence him. So when you hear about this story tonight, I'm going to go in a lot more detail about it tonight because I got a lot of clips and things like that. When you hear about this story tonight, I want you to remember that when we talk about the Congresswoman who is threatening Matt Taibbi, and it's not just her, by the way, I want you to remember that it was Mehdi Hasan who actually stirred the pot. He planted the seed, so to speak. That's how we got here. Let's go on.
Mehdi made this very scurrilous charge and claimed that Taibbi was wrong when he said that an arm of the Department of Homeland Security was involved with an NGO in contacting Twitter during the 2020 election for censorship actions, for content moderation policies. And look, I've reported on this even before the Twitter files. I've looked, for weeks at this issue, at hundreds, if not thousands, of documents. And I simply corrected the record. I said that Matt Taibbi, in his congressional testimony, was 100% accurate. I published new documents, new emails. I surfaced old reporting that I've done. I did a very detailed response to this allegation that Matt Taibbi lied under oath, that Mehdi lodged. Rather than a substantive response to my reporting, Mehdi went into the gutter. He started claiming that I was a careerist, that I'm a liar, and that I'm an Islamophobic bigot, which is the most absurd claim possible.
So Mehdi Hasan started to come after Lee Fang after Lee Fang basically checked him and said, no, this information is not incorrect. So he started to smear Lee Fang, this is not a surprise to me. So of course, Lee Fang decided, okay, let me expose you for what you really are.
Absolutely baseless claim. And a lot of readers encouraged me to look into Mehdi's career and into his background, that a lot of these claims against me were cases of projection. And that's what I did. At my Substack, I went back into 20 years of Mehdi's writing, finding lots of cases of, I think, very sloppy citation or straight up plagiarism, and the exact type of careerism that I think people find problematic in journalism, that rather than having a principled approach to the news, to journalism, Mehdi has switched his positions and taken whatever kind of value is convenient for advancing his career. Someone who claimed to be against abortion and, against abortion rights suddenly flip-flops on that and now demonizes anyone who's anti-abortion as, motivated by white supremacy and racism. I mean, it's a little bit absurd. And I would just encourage anyone to read my Substack, take a look at the allegations. There's a particularly intellectually lazy form of journalism that.
And we're going to take a look at that also as well, because I do want to add something here in reference to what Lee Fang said about Mehdi Hasan basically signing on to issues to help further his career. I do see that. Now, he mentioned how he switched his position or flip-flopped on abortion, but he also flip-flopped on LGBTQ issues. And this is something that MSNBC doesn't want to talk about. A lot of people in liberal media, they don't want to bring it up. But you have to understand, too, that it was also a time when Mehdi Hasan was actually not in favor of LGBTQ groups. Jimmy Dore revealed that old footage on his show. So I think that's the same thing, too. I think Mehdi Hasan has been doing that. Now, you have to understand, when it comes to plagiarism, there are actually software applications that you can use to see if someone plagiarized their work. And I'll give you an example. Faculty actually use this. So those of you who are in undergrad or grad school, beware. There are faculty members that actually use software. What they'll do is they'll take your paper, or you can do this with an article as well. They run it through the software, and the software will pick up certain words to let them know if there is another document to compare it to that also use the exact same phrasing. Now, with plagiarism, you have to be careful, because you can get in trouble for plagiarism by using the exact same wording, but you can also get in trouble for plagiarism by using a quote, but not using proper citations. And proper citations doesn't mean that you just give the author the credit in the bottom of the article and the footnotes. It also means that you use it in a proper way. So even if you don't use the proper format when it comes to the citations, that can also be seen as plagiarism. You have to be very careful. And I know this because I went to grad school and I've written a lot of papers. Okay. I don't care to write any more papers. No more papers, okay? But I've written a lot of papers, and this is something that you cannot be lazy with. When you are citing people, when you are writing, you have to be careful that you are not copying someone word for word. And if you do, it needs to be a quote, and you need to give them credit with proper citations. Now, Mehdi Hasan, who is a journalist, he would know that. He would know that. So I'm really surprised. Lee Fang said he went back 20 years. I'm really surprised. No one caught this before. No one. Let's go on.
That Mehdi kind of specializes in, and I think the plagiarism examples speak to that.
Right. And I think Matt Taibbi in his exchange with Mehdi a little bit tried to, point out, well, while MSNBC was, what did you do to correct the record when MSNBC was saying all sorts of things about Russiagate, for instance, and he tried to say he had nothing to do with that. And I think maybe you or Matt or someone, maybe it was Glenn, someone found some examples of him doing exactly that. So, we're not trying to undermine the guy in a vacuum or something, like go back 20 years ago to find something he did wrong. But he was very much harping on Matt for these, couple errors that Matt acknowledged and then corrected. And then especially the thing you pointed out, it's absolutely true from, looking at what you've reported and others that this, that the two agencies involved, the government agency and the nonprofit, and Mehdi tried to suggest that it was just, you transpose the two, but both were involved in this project of flagging tweets on behalf of the government.
No, I find this kind of all very despicable. Look, we all get things wrong in our journalism. I think how we act as journalists is how quickly we move to correct the record and really explain the truth. I mean, it's reporting on this kind of complicated issues can be messy, it can be difficult. But, Matt Taibbi in one tweet mixed up one acronym, and he quickly corrected the record. Mehdi has engaged in many lies in this whole process. Lying about never talking about the Hunter Biden laptop, he did. Lying about, never kind of like reporting on this kind of some of these more scurrilous Russia gate allegations, he did. Yeah. And then the most serious allegation here is that Matt Taibbi lied under oath to Congress. And this is a claim that Mehdi's repeated over and over again. This is perjury. This is serious stuff. This is, after Mehdi made this claim, AOC then retweeted and said, look, let's kind of undermine all of the Twitter files reporting. This.
And that right there goes to show you when AOC did that right there lets you know that the liberal media the politicians, the Democrat politicians in DC have the backing of the liberal media. For AOC to jump on that bandwagon when she didn't do any research, didn't look up any data, just simply took Mehdi Hasan's word for it and retweeted it. Do you see how dangerous this can be? And now you have someone like Matt Taibbi who is being threatened with being imprisoned because of all of this. But I tell you, certain journalists or commentators, they back and protect the politicians. It happens on the Democratic Party, it happens in the Republican Party. Both networks, the liberal side and the right side, they both do this. They protect the politicians, because if the politicians doesn't have the media on their side, then what do they have?
This is kind of like very petty, personalized attacks, and that aren't true. You know, like this claim that Matt Taibbi got it wrong. I've demonstrably showed that Taibbi was right when talking about CISA, this arm of the Department of Homeland Security that was highly involved in content moderation policies at Facebook and Twitter and other social media companies, you know, really highly embedded in these firms and pressuring them on a regular basis. And Mehdi, you know, quickly claiming that this was a lie and this undermined the entire thesis of the Twitter files. Look, you know, I've reported on Twitter documents. Many other reporters have. I think this is a kind of juvenile attempt to obscure the actual contents of the revelations, the reporting. This attempt to discredit all the journalism because of one error in one tweet, you know, I find it very distasteful.
Yeah, Lee, I got to say, I found your reporting on the Twitter files in particular one of my favorite reads. It was so substantive. And one of the most frustrating aspects of watching the interview with Taibbi and Mehdi was the failure of Mehdi to really engage in the substance and the value, the broader value of the Twitter files, despite any mistake that might exist here or there. So to that end, I want to ask you, very shortly after that interview, of course, Matt Taibbi and Elon Musk seemed to get into their own dispute about the nature of Substack and Matt Taibbi's relationship with them. And in a Twitter Live last week, Elon Musk said that all good things basically have to come to an end and that the Twitter files is basically over. I know that Matt Taibbi was planning before that to hire journalists to continue the work on the files, including Aaron Mate. And I believe you have now left The Intercept and are working over at Substack. Are there any plans to continue reporting on the Twitter files?
Good question.
Yeah, I have a lot of research. I visited Twitter for a few days in late December and early January, and I was able to write down and copy a lot of information. So I have more stories coming. I've reported on the Pentagon's kind of covert ops influence operations. They had this gigantic network of fake accounts and fake news sites on the Middle East that were parroting the Pentagon's line and trying to shape Middle East opinion with complete secrecy, and that Twitter had full knowledge of this operation. They even created a special kind of bot, this whitelist bot that kind of amplified these accounts. At the same time, Twitter was telling the public that they were doing everything they could to shut down every state-backed influence operation, that anytime any government does this, they'll shut it down. No, they were working as a concierge service for the Pentagon to spread the Pentagon's propaganda on wars in Yemen and Syria and beyond. And I've also looked at how pharmaceutical companies were lobbying Twitter for censorship, that a pharmaceutical funded group had backdoor access and were shaping some of the content decisions in terms of shadow banning and blocking certain accounts that were critical of certain COVID policies. Yep. But I'm just getting started. There's going to be more there. I can't really speak towards what Elon Musk will or won't do. It kind of doesn't matter for my reporting. I'd love to have more access, but we'll see, TBD. But I have more material and more reporting to come.
Well,
it's not even so much about Matt Taibbi, so to speak. It's about the information that was revealed. That's what it's really about. Now, I told you, Fang has that Substack, and he actually published about this. I want to share this because he goes into more detail in this Substack article. So I think this is important to see in reference to Mehdi Hasan's plagiarism. So the name of this article, if you want to read the full article, is called Mehdi Hasan Plagiarized Pro Spanking Column. So again, this is Fang. This is on Substack. So I want to start with this piece right here. Before he was shouting down opponents with ad hominem slurs, Hasan was passing off others' reporting as his own, sometimes without any citation at all. This piece right here, I'm sorry. Like again, I majored in broadcast journalism and English, and this is a big no-no for me. He said sometimes without any citation at all. That is a no. Period. You do not do that. And what kills me is whoever the editors were for these outlets, how did they not catch that? Or did they see it and they just chose to ignore it? People can sue you for that. People can sue you. If you don't know, people can sue you for plagiarizing their work. Let's go on. In one of his first attempts at journalism, Hasan authored a column in defense of spanking children, No Harm in Spanking, in January 2000. That is nearly a word-for-word duplication of the article When to Spank, published 2 years earlier in the U.S. News and World Report. So not only did he plagiarize, but he plagiarized a major outlet. And no one caught this. The similarities are apparent from the beginning of Hasan's piece, smacking. Let me make this bigger. Yeah, I like that better. Now I just have to scroll down again. The similarities are apparent from the beginning of Hasan's piece. Anti-smacking crusaders have consistently relied upon inconclusive studies to make sweeping overgeneralizations about the dangers of smacking. He began his piece for The Independent, a London-based newspaper. Let's go on. It's virtually identical to a line used by co-authors Lynn Rossellini and Anna Mulrin. In their news article on the topic for U.S. News and World Report, anti-spanking crusaders relied on inconclusive studies to make sweeping overgeneralizations about spanking dangers. Mulrin and Rossellini wrote. So in short, Hasan is a fraud. There's no telling how many times he's done this, how many times he's plagiarized other people. And I don't know who Maureen and Rossellini are, but if they are finding out about this now, from what Fang has said, I really think they should try to pursue some type of legal action here. So Mehdi Hasan, I want to say this, he's not a journalist. He is a fraud. He goes on to say the Hasan piece titled No Harm in Smacking goes on to copy every single line from the U.S. News and World Report article, save for occasionally swapping out or adding a few words in each sentence. Hasan wrote in 1998, even the American Academy of Pediatrics toned down its blanket injunction against smacking, though it still takes a dim view of the practice. In fact, an AAP conference on corporal punishment in 1996 concluded that in certain circumstances, smacking or spanking may be an effective backup to other forms of discipline. There's no evidence that a child who is spanked moderately is going to grow up to be a criminal or antisocial or violent. That's coming from S. Kenneth Schonberg, a pediatrics professor co-chairing the meeting. In fact, the reverse may be true, yada, yada. Now he's comparing it to the U.S. News World Report. This week, even the American Academy of Pediatrics is expected to tone down its blanket injunction against spanking, though it still and I'm not going to read this all over again, but you see, this is virtually the same. They even go on to say there is no evidence that a child who is spanked moderately is going to grow up to be a criminal or antisocial or violent, says S. Kenneth Schonberg, the pediatrics professor who co-chaired the conference. Pretty much word for word. Let's go on. Hasan continued, no study demonstrates that spanking a child leads to abuse. Indeed, it may be the other way around. Parents who end up abusing their children may misuse all forms of discipline, including spanking. Let's go down to the comparison. I'm not going to read the whole thing, but U.S. World Report. But no study demonstrates that spanking a child leads to abuse. Indeed, it may be the other way around. Guys, this is almost word for word. And no one caught this, not one person. And we probably wouldn't even know about this if Mehdi Hasan didn't try to punk Fang. We probably wouldn't know about this. Let's go on here. Jesus Louise. So he even included the PDF file so you can download the articles. You can download Mehdi Hasan's article, No Harm in Smacking, and you can download the U.S. News article, When to Spank. The Hasan column on spanking is a clear violation of simple ethics code outlined by the Society for Professional Journalists, which is to always attribute every single time. And you don't have to go to journalism school to know that. Again, we learned this in undergrad, learned that in high school as well. You do not plagiarize. Come on, man. What's that, Bryce? LMAO with the PDF files? I know. He included it all. He's like, receipts. Hey, you got to have it nowadays, right? You got to have it nowadays. The articles are not hosted online anywhere publicly. I found them via a newspaper archive, so I copied them above. Hasan's defense of spanking came in response to a letter from Peter Saunders, the director of the UK Nationals Association for People Abused in Childhood. Saunders had written a letter in the Independent advocating for the government to enact more restrictions on the physical punishment of children. Later that year, again in the pages of the Independent, Hasan lifted passages from another writer. The Hasan piece, Arab Bantustans, uses passage from the 94% Solution, an article by Jeff Halper in the Middle East Research and Information Project. And he gives examples of this here. We'll read a little bit. Hasan wrote, today, according to the Israeli Housing Ministry's own figures, 195 exclusively Jewish settlement housings, some 400,000 Israelis are sprinkled across the occupied territories. Let's go down to Halper's article. Today, 195 exclusive Jewish settlements housing some 400,000 Israelis are sprinkled across the occupied territories. Again, pretty much word for word. Let me go down. Occasionally, though, Hasan's sloppiness shined through in his work. In his first book, which valorized the life of centrist Labor Party leader Ed Miliband, Hasan used scare quotes to describe Ralph Miliband, writing that during the Second World War, he was generally the only Jew and certainly the only stateless Belgian-born French-speaking LSE student among the enlisted men, and the only one trying to set aside time to read Marx's Das Kapital. There is no indication where this sentence came from. It's only upon further investigation that I found that it was taken directly from an article published by journalist Andy McSmith in The Independent a year prior to the publication of Hasan's book. And he worked for The Independent. No one caught this. Oh my God. Much of the rest of the book is taken from other histories published about the family and contains little new reporting. Mehdi, you know you really messed up with this one. You really messed up with this one. He goes on to say he spent much of his days in the UK cozying up to establishment Labour Party leaders. His book on Ed Miliband is far from the only example. Now, as an aspiring U.S. pundit, He falls over himself, lavishing praise on President Joe Biden and repeating the Democratic Party line on any subject of the day. It's no wonder that just as it becomes fashionable among many liberals to defend the FBI and the Department of Homeland Security from critical reporting about agency overreach, Hasan leaps at the opportunity to lie about Taibbi's testimony and to smear every journalist who has engaged with the Twitter files documents. He is a careerist. So what he does is he kind of just swings with the position that is popular at that time. Bingo. One of the quickest ways, I think, to move up in journalism, to move with the positions that are popular at that time, which means you really stand for nothing. Basically. He goes on to say Hasan is more than happy to bend any principle in service of his career. The greatest such example is Hasan's attempt to work at the Daily Mail, seen as a British equivalent to Fox News. On television, Hasan castigated the immigrant-bashing, woman-hating, Muslim-smearing, NHS undermining, gay-baiting Daily Mail, clearly making the case that the paper is composed of unreconstructed racists. That prompted the British outlet to publish Hasan's own application letter in which Hasan pleaded for a columnist position. Again, he is a careerist. We don't know what Mehdi really stands for. We don't know what Mehdi Hasan really believes. What we do know, what we have seen, is that Mehdi stole other journalists' work, that Mehdi follows the popular position so that he can climb the career ladder in journalism, and that Mehdi is a fraud. That's what we know.